Welcome back to the Black Room. Dr. F and the main man, Jazz. Jazz, what are we dealing with next?
Well, bro, like I've been seeing within like the sports industry, entertainment, a lot of people now sort of in F1 we've seen taking a knee. We've seen a couple of people raising the fist. We saw Thierry Henry take a knee for 8 minutes 46 seconds. And I guess the question on this is, like, is that doing anything? Is that bringing any value to the movement in itself? Like, is there a requirement for people to be doing that sort of stuff?
Topical. I like it. Ooh. You start.
So where I stand on this is, I think that anything that anyone is doing which is towards the movement has value, regardless of how small it may seem. And we talked earlier about the losing momentum, and some of the stuff we talked about is social media and news platforms and stuff. And I guess if you look at you and I, like we don't really so we've got our social media channels and stuff like that, but we don't have a platform which is worldwide. So for our voices to be heard, it needs to be transitioned through a much bigger movement in some respects. If we look at some footballers, Formula One drivers, etc., they've got such a large audience watching what they're doing. So even though at the time it might seem like a small individual gesture, it's again raising awareness, it's keeping people thinking about what's happening. I think the moment that stuff starts to disappear as well, like, do we completely lose that from the mainstream media entirely, and suddenly it's all background work? So for me, I think it's important. I think to add to that, if that's the only thing you're doing, then it's useless to me. Like, I need you to do more. But if there is an opportunity for you to take a stand and push something forward, which is pushing that agenda forward, why would you not do that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think I had sort of differing thoughts, but I think the point about doing something, because to flip the question on its head, would you rather they did nothing?
Absolutely.
And I would obviously rather they did something. And I think to your point about people having a platform, you know, I think especially, so Formula One is my sport. It's what it's the only thing that I focus on the weekends. And I think you look at the diversity in Formula One, and you look at the global scale in which Formula One operates, and the two don't reconcile. It almost doesn't make sense to me that you could have a sport that's that white, that is that global, and you have somebody like Lewis Hamilton, who goes out and is making these gestures, who has a significant following. But equally, even if he didn't have a significant following, the sport has a significant following globally. And so now you've got conversations happening in places and in pockets and in countries where those conversations might not necessarily take place, because there may not be a significant proportion of the population who are, you know, I guess I think people are starting to ask the question, well, how long does this go on for? How sustained should this be? And that's the bit that I think people are almost looking at the finish line and not looking at the first 10 meters. You know what I mean? And I feel like, okay, we'll deal with the finish line when we get to the finish line. If you look at the way a 200-meter race is broken down, the first 50 is focused on, you know, that acute burst out of the blocks, and we're still, to my mind, we're still in that sort of burst out the blocks phase. So we'll worry about how we, you know, keep our legs up and how we chop the arms for the last 50 meters when we get to the last 50 meters. But for now, we're focused on that burst out of the blocks. So I don't know. In terms of, we talked, you know, earlier about momentum. How sort of sustained and how, maybe dramatic's not the right word, but how sort of important or how big do these gestures do you think need to be from these people that have got these significant platforms?
I think the larger the better. But I don't think everyone has it in them to know what to do as such. And I think the gestures in themselves, for me, particularly if you're someone that really supports the movement, but at this point you're not sure how you can influence, it's something that you can do which will communicate to your entire community and broader than that. I think the other thing on this stuff, which I find really interesting, is when people are not willing to take the gesture. You know? So we saw with F1, we saw some people were willing to take the knee and some people weren't. And I think for me, again, it starts a different debate, a different discussion, because there were reasons why people weren't willing to take the knee, and some people saying I'm doing other things in the background, and which is all well and good, but again, it keeps the dialogue moving. So even from them, a small gesture, which the sport have decided to take, there's a whole dialogue that comes out of that. And for me, at this point, that is still the most important thing.
Yeah. How did you feel about that? Because I was thinking, I don't understand why you wouldn't make this small gesture to reflect your support for something so important. I struggle to understand what could be so controversial about this gesture that would stop somebody who claims, and maybe this isn't fair, maybe this is me doing them a disservice, maybe there's tons of stuff happening in the background, but I think to your earlier point around people having a platform, you know, particularly in Formula 1, all these drivers have got massive followings, there's only 20 of them.
Yeah.
So they've all got a massive following, and I think the second you try and break ranks and be clever by not doing what everybody, and even as I talk to you now, I'm firing from the hip, because I'm like, you know, should everybody have to do the same thing? No. But if you're saying that you support this thing, and this is the way that this thing is being reflected, exactly. I'm kind of like, well, I'm struggling to get my head around why you wouldn't just do that.
I'm completely with it. I'm completely with exactly what you said. Like, so for me, anyone that I saw that didn't take the knee, I don't care what they're talking about. Like, it's let's be super simple with this. It is literally taking one knee and putting it to the ground for a duration of time. That is it. Just to say I support this movement. So you verbally said it, See, but you're not willing to take the knee. What's the difference between the two? And there's been some very interesting, like, it wouldn't land well with my community. But that's the point. If it doesn't land well with your community, or like, you're in a position where you can influence that. And actually, if you're saying, I know it's not going to land well with you guys, but listen, this is important. Yeah. And we need to get on side, because this is bigger than like what people like or don't like. This is human rights. This is about Black lives, and we need to stand. And I'm standing. And if you're with me, then roll with me. If you're not, then I'm showing you that I'm standing anyway. And for me, that's the stance of power. And if you don't want to do that, for me, like, I'm not with it.
Yeah, no, I kind of hear you. I think Matt Hancock made some interesting comments, didn't he, when he was asked whether or not he was going to take the knee. And part of me thinks that there is an ignorance to where that has come from. So I guess, as I understand the backstory, and tell me if you know any different, but I think the knee started in the US with US football, with American football, with Colin Kaepernick, who took the knee on the advice of a US veteran who said, if you don't want to stand during the national anthem because you feel strongly, this is a way to show peaceful protest. And that's where the knee has come from. I guess when you have people like Matt Hancock saying, well, has this come from Game of Thrones, he said. And I was like, are you sure that this is what you want to broadcast to the world? You want to ask the question, this has come from Game of Thrones? Wow. So part of me feels like it's ignorance. And part of me struggles with the symbolism part of it, because I think of more, to my mind, important gestures. So I'll give you a very specific example. If you look at the Formula 1 race that took place, the second race that took place in Austria, and Mercedes won that race, and Mercedes have got a black fluid engineer called Stephanie. And Mercedes put her on the podium, and in doing so, wrote history. Absolutely. She's now the first black female to take a... And understanding the importance of the symbolism, to me, is incredibly important. Because what I also don't want to see is a bunch of people take the knee because they don't want to get slack for it. And I think
very true.
Part of me feels like you have to take an informed stance on doing what it is that you're doing, so that it becomes actually meaningful. I think it's very easy for everybody to take a knee. If you don't understand why you're taking a knee, you don't understand the legacy or where it's come from, or history, or the intent, then I think it could be lost. I'm more interested in people who are thinking about, what can I do to move things forward in a way that's tangible? And Mercedes have written history.
I think that was powerful. I think the Mercedes stance was powerful. And I think that supersedes, by far, taking a knee. And there are levels to this. Like, there are levels to everything, right? There are levels to this. So taking a knee is like a very basic, like, you've not really done much, but like, I appreciate you kind of continuing to raise awareness of the movement we're trying driving forward. Like, putting her onto the podium is another step, because that stands in history now, and that's the first black woman that's ever done that. Her name will be held in history forever. That can't be taken away. And then there are levels to that as well. But not everyone has the opportunity to make that. So if Mercedes weren't on the podium that week, she's not there. You know what I mean? So what else are you doing?
It's a very good point.
Like, the world looking at you. But I think your point is right about, don't just do something for the sake of it. So we saw that with Black Tuesday. A lot of people maybe just posting black. So that kind of thing. And if you're taking a knee for that reason, then that's fine. But my issue, I think, is when people don't take the knee, and I guess in this scenario, we know why people are taking the knee, right? It's the context. It's just to show support to the Black Lives Matter movement. My issue is when you don't take the knee, but you tell me you're supporting the movement. I don't understand how the two don't match.
Part of me feels, if you're going to say, I'm not going to take the knee, but I support the movement, then you have to be able to provide tangible evidence as to how you're supporting the movement in other ways.
Absolutely.
And if you can't do it, then the two don't reconcile. So talk to me about this. So we've talked a little bit about Formula 1. I know that in Premiership football, which I don't follow so much, but I know that for a certain number of games, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, there was Black Lives Matter on the back of the football kits. I know that Thierry Henry took a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. to mark the amount of time that a knee was on George Floyd's neck.
Yep.
How important is it? How important are these types of gestures to me? Because I think the conversations that we've had about ensuring the conversation is specific to the particular group. So Black Lives Matters is different from, marginalized community lives matters. Like
Sure.
it's very direct. So talk to me a bit about that, and talk to me about the poignancy, if any, of Thierry Henry taking the knee for that amount of time.
Sure. So I think for me, so I'm a football man. So you're F1 man, I'm a football man. And I think at broader level, the importance is still there in football. I think football is an area what epitomises what black people experience in life, right? So so many black people within the sport. I think like over a third of players, or I can't remember the exact stats, but are black. But then when you get up to management and ownership level, suddenly disappears. So I think football is an area where they absolutely need to be at the forefront of addressing this issue. Now, if we talk about Thierry Henry, 8 minutes 46 seconds. I get. Obviously, there's a clear correlation as to why he did it for that long. Is that any different to doing it for 30 seconds? For me, not really. For me, it's just taking a stance and showing that, listen, I'm making a stand right now where I know the whole world is watching, and this is how I'm going to do it. So if that was something personal to him, I've got no problem with that. But to me personally, him doing that for 8 minutes 46 seconds versus doing it for 30 seconds makes no difference at all.
Well, let me ask you this: we're talking about it, aren't we? You're talking
about
8 minutes 46 seconds. We're talking about it.
It's very true.
I mean, I absolutely agree with your point. I think if you do it for 30 seconds, you do it for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, you've done it. And I think that's the thing for me. I know certainly when everything kicked off, I was just looking for solidarity because I knew that people couldn't have possibly had the opportunity to make a plan and operate on, execute on that plan about what they were going to do in the background. So all I was looking for was a visible cue for solidarity, right? What are you doing?
Yeah.
What have you said on your social media? What have you physically taken a knee? What have you, I was looking for it. But now, we can say that the Premiership footballer players took a knee and they've got Black Lives Matter. But we're specifically talking about Thierry Henry and his 8 minutes and 46 seconds. So, is that mission accomplished for Thierry Henry, do you reckon?
It's really interesting because even you just saying that has triggered some additional thoughts in that, because I think one of the things in terms of how we are as humans, and once something happens like reasonably consistently, it becomes normalised, right? So it's almost like it's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
And I guess if we look at the Premier League, I don't know how many games have been back now, 6, 7, 8, however many games, and like when you multiply that up, that's hundreds of games that have happened. Everyone taking it at the start of the game is quite normal.
Yeah, sure.
So it's no longer, to your point, a conversation point.
Yeah.
It's just what they do. So as much as I still think that's important, it's an interesting point you raised that, the 8 minutes 46 seconds, like you couldn't ignore that.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't just. It's like, why is he doing it? He's still down there?
Yeah.
Like, they're 2-0 down. He's still there. The player just got sent off. He's still there. So, like, there's something in that. For me, I'm still with my initial perspective that it's not a huge difference. I think, yes, he's making a different point, but, like, how is that sort of thing sustained? Like, does someone need to... 10 people need to do it for 8 minutes, 46 seconds next time. Like, how does that move? So I think the important thing to me is making a stance. It doesn't have to be the 8 minutes 46 seconds. Make a stance because the world is watching you. Levels to this. Whether it's 8 minutes 46 seconds or 30 seconds, that's level 0.
Yeah.
So I want to see your level 1, 2, 3, 4 actions.
So to the point that we were discussing earlier about ensuring that we keep momentum behind this thing, like. Is the fact that, and I think you nailed it, I think the taking of the knee is now sort of, it's normalised, right? Yeah. And so the fact that Thierry Henry took his knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds is not normalised. Not everybody's taking a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And so we're talking about it. So do you think this is an effort from Thierry Henry to try and keep the conversation going? Is this because after you take a knee for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I'm struggling to think about what different ways you can take a knee that's going to keep the conversation going.
Absolutely.
So,
I mean, if that's an effort from Henry to keep the conversation going, I'm disappointed. It's the truth. I'm extremely disappointed because he's got a voice. He's got a voice, and like he's got such a huge following. Like he's so well renowned in the UK, in front, like globally. If he wants to keep the conversation going, there are a multitude of ways of doing that through having a discussion. I think if that's the best way you can think of, and if it genuinely is, then fine, because that's the best way you can think of, and do what you think is best, right? But I don't think it is. And as I said before, that's level 0. 30 seconds, 8 minutes, level 0. So to keep the conversation going, we can't stay at level 0 forever.